I learned pretty early on that informing yourself on what's going on off the court makes you a better fan for what's going on the court. The NBA in the 90s essentially gave away their product for free to these emerging countries. This is where the flexibility of the apron comes in. As I mentioned, second apron, this is the very dreaded one, and why a bunch of teams have been making moves to get outside of it. The business side of the NBA works to maximize the entertainment value of this product rather than the basketball value of this product. By the end of it, it's going to be paying him over $70 million. And the crazy thing is, he'll be underpaid relative to what he can get on the open market if it was a free-for-all.
Welcome to The Stroll Season 1. I'm your host, Sam Thompson. In this season, I'll work to engage in conversations that dive deep into the intricacies of each guest's unique career, while also bringing to light the reality of how each guest maintains their health and the professional culture they work in. Today's guest is Kyle Tannanbaum, coming to us from Austin, Texas. Kyle graduated from UT Austin's McCombs School of Business in 2022 and works in finance at Deloitte. Kyle also has a background in basketball, both as a player and behind the scenes. He spent time working in the Dallas Mavericks front office and basketball operations and scouting, and he's seen firsthand how teams actually make decisions, build rosters, and how front office moves translate to what happens on the court. And here's where Kyle diverges from the beaten path. Kyle took his experiences and love for the game and turned it into basketball business, a YouTube channel meticulously detailing the true force behind professional basketball. Business. Kyle's channel breaks down the money moves behind the hardwood using thorough analysis paired with engaging storytelling. His videos help me understand the forces influencing my beloved Celtics sale and free agency moves, and that video is the reason for Kyle and my conversation today. Before jumping into today's episode, I'd like to briefly mention our charity partner, Sochabe, a federally recognized and registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. Sochabe is a grassroots charity organization that recently built Seminole Academy outside of Mbala, Zambia. For those who don't know, Zambia is a country in southern Africa. Sochabe was founded by my lifelong friend, Teza Simonyola, who named the Seminole Academy after his father. Teza is a lifelong tennis player and was ATP and ITF ranked in his heyday and was a member of the Zambian Davis Cup team. He started Sochabe over a decade ago and went on to build Seminole Academy to give the children in his home village the opportunity to attend school. Sochabe emphasizes academics while also providing students with the opportunity to play sports outside of school. If you'd like to donate to Sochabe, the PayPal donation link can be found at sochabe.com. That's SOCHABE.com. I'd like to highlight that Sochabe operates with virtually no overhead. Every single penny that is donated ends up directly funding education, school maintenance and development, and equipment. When Teza travels to Zambia to visit the school, he pays for his flights out of his own pocket. Once again, you can donate at sochabe.com, that's SOCHABE.com, to support Seminole Academy and Teza's goal of bringing education to the children of his home village. Thank you. Hopefully, you're excited to learn more about the business side of the NBA and hear about Kyle's journey to creating basketball business. With that, it's time to stroll. Here's my conversation with Kyle. To start the episode, I'd just like to give a little bit of a story about how we actually are kind of speaking here today. So maybe about 3-4 years ago, my good buddy Sam Hoffman added me to a group chat of Celtics fans, which was composed of my friend Sam Hoffman and about 30 other phone numbers that I had no idea who they were or where they were from. All I knew that they were Celtics fans. And maybe a year and a half ago, someone in this group chat, again, didn't have their number, sent a video that was a YouTube video outlining the Celtics roster construction from a financial perspective and how it hopefully enable them to make a championship run. And I remember clicking on the video, seeing that the channel was a relatively new channel, maybe like 40 or 50 subscribers, and just being blown away by the detail in the video, how articulate it was, and kind of the quality of production that it was for such a small channel. And I remember saying, after that video was sent, wow, that video was so informative, and I'm kind of shocked that that channel isn't something bigger or something more popular that, you know, I may have seen before. And then unbeknownst to me, you were the one who sent it, and it was your channel, and thank God I had that type of reaction. But that is how we eventually met and ended up filming this episode here today. So thank you for being willing to join me and talking a little bit about the NBA with me.
Of course, Sam, I'm very happy to be a part of your journey as you record these episodes. I've I've loved seeing the content you're putting out with your guests about how you really just you establish yourself in your career for the first time when you're on your own. I mean, growing up, we all have the structure of, okay, you go to school, then you have after school activities, and you graduate, then go to next grade, then you go to high school, then you go to college, and then you have to get a job. But where's the job to do? What do you want to do with the job? What happens when you don't like that job? So you're kind of on your own, and this podcast is really just like a vehicle to capture the bull by your horns and take ownership of your own life and your job. And I feel like that's what my basketball business YouTube channel is also doing. I've always, had an interest in basketball and business and how those two interact. What does a trade mean? Why did they sign this person? Why is this, this promotion going on? What are they trying to do here? So trying to understand the why between things that are happening on the court. I learned pretty early on that informing yourself on what's going on off the court makes you a better fan for what's going on the court.
And before we continue to dive into those specifics, I'd love for anyone listening here today who is maybe a little bit more unfamiliar with the common financial terms in the NBA, I'd love for you to kind of break those down. What do they mean? Just so that there's maybe a shared understanding amongst the audience.
I definitely think it's important to be informed of what the language is, so you know what people are talking about, maybe when something's wrong or if something's missing entirely. So let's start directly from the top. The CBA, that's an acronym that's thrown around a lot. It stands for Collective Bargaining Agreement. That's essentially an agreement between the NBA owners, so the NBA itself, because, well, who owns the NBA? The owners of the teams in the NBA. And then the players within the NBA, because you can't have a league without the players actually playing on the court. So it's in the name itself, collective bargaining. They each, negotiated and agreed to give up something and get something in return, just like as any negotiation would go. And they have this agreement that says, okay, we'll make a bunch of money from the league and we'll split it around 50-50. Owners get 51% of the basketball related revenue and the players get 49% of it. Now, going a bit further down into the nuances of each language within the CBA, the one that's come up the most, especially in the past year or so, is second apron. And you're probably thinking, well, okay, what's the first apron? Is there a third apron? Is there a fourth apron? Where are you getting these aprons? Is it something like in the kitchen? Do I have to wear it do teams have to wear it to cook? But no, it's really essentially like a traditional salary cap. So there's three types of salary caps in sports. There's a hard cap, there's a soft cap, and there's a flexible cap. A hard cap is, in the name itself, it says like you cannot go over this line for any sort of circumstances whatsoever. If you gotta bring this guy in, but you can't, well, tough luck. You got to work around the hard cap. So in a league, for example, like that is the NFL, and you see a bunch of creative financial accounting within the NFL's collective bargaining and hard cap constraints. The biggest example is New Orleans Saints. Well, they've kind of kicked the can down the road, per se, of their team finances. Then you have a soft cap, which is kind of what the MLB has, where it says like, hey, there's a cap here, and once you go over it, this is like just a noting how much luxury tax you have to pay. This is kind of just like an advisement or a guide, or not even a cap, because you see big teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets just spending on huge salaries. And because there's no restrictions on spending on those huge salaries, they see kind of the luxury tax as a cost of doing business. Imagine if a company is wanting to get a new product to the market and they have to pay a fine to do it. Well, that's kind of like the cost of doing business for them. Paying a fine to get their to get a sports team product to market, aka winning a championship, is luxury tax. And the flexible cap, which is what the NBA has, is a mix of both. So you have a hard cap and a soft cap, where they say the salary cap, quote unquote, I believe is at $148 million going to the 2025-26 season. But when you think about it, almost every team is above it. We have our Celtics, who have Jason Tatum around 54 million, Jaylen Brown at 52, and then a bunch of other salaries accumulating to like 188. Well, if the salary cap's at 148, they're 40 million over. Per the basic math there. How does that work out? Well, this is where the flexibility of the apron comes in. As I mentioned, second apron, this is the very dreaded one, and why a bunch of teams have been making moves to get outside of it. The second apron is essentially the owners and the players agreeing that we need a hard cap. We don't want to give you we don't want to make a traditional hard cap because that's too hard to go. The cat's already out of the bottle. So we're going to place a second apron that's going to make it very, very hard and very, very difficult to build a team if you're in the second apron threshold. The biggest second apron restriction, in my opinion, is the no aggregation of salaries. Let's say I'm the Atlanta Hawks and I want to trade for LeBron James. And let's say LeBron is making $50 million. Well, to do that, I don't have anyone making $50 million that I want to give up because I want to build a team around him. But I have two players making $25 million. So I can aggregate those $25 million players together, send them for one $50 million player, and then all is well. But if you're a second apron team, like the Cleveland Cavaliers going through the season, they can't do that. So going back to the LeBron James trade example, there was a lot of news earlier in July about will LeBron leave the Lakers? And based on the timing of it, the only reasonable way for him to leave the Lakers was through a trade. But the only team to trade for him would have to do a huge multi-team. There'd have to be a huge multi-team trade because the teams he would want to go to that are contenders are already at that second apron or very close to that second apron level, so they can't aggregate salaries. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation there, a rock and hard place. Choose whatever colorful metaphor you want to use for the second apron qualms. And then the first apron, very similar to second apron, except you have more flexibilities. We won't go into the nuances here.
Maybe just to recap there and tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but the CBA is the agreement between the NBA owners and the players for how they're going to split the proceeds that come about from the league. And then the first and second apron are kind of the penalties that teams will incur if their salary caps are above the predetermined limits set by the league. So if you get into that first apron, it seems there's more minor financial penalties that maybe doesn't restrict what you can do as a team too much. When you hit that second apron, there's probably going to be much more severe financial penalties. It will also restrict some of the things you can do in way of structuring trades or some other basketball operations as well. So it seems like the new league financial structure has really informed the moves that have happened in this offseason. And when did this new CBA with this first and second apron come about? And how has that maybe changed how free agency is done and trades are made in the league?
So the CBA was officially signed and went into effect following the 2023 offseason, but this is really the first offseason. So 2023, 2024, and now 2025, the first one where it's really taking account and really informing team making decisions. I mean, obviously in the 2023 offseason, we saw our Celtics kind of change the whole fabric of their team, save for the two J's, by trading Marcus Smart and getting Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday through a few trades to get him. And then this offseason, they traded away both of those guys for salary saving purposes. And this was on purpose. Don't think that the NBA owners were, they wanted to see 7 different championships in 7 years. This is what they wanted. They were tired of seeing teams like the Clippers and the Warriors considering the luxury tax as a cost of doing business to win championships. And while they did benefit from the gravy train of having these non-parity finals, like the 4 straight Cavs Warriors, which had consistently some of the highest ratings since the Jordan era Bulls were in the finals. And in turn, these higher ratings boosted NBA team valuations. They want to win ultimately. The old guard of the rich Uncle Pennybags owner that's really in the team that, I bought this team for $5 million at a poker game in 1967 and now it's worth $5 billion. Like, all those owners are pretty much gone. Now you have, these are private equity owned backed assets. These are multi-billion dollar families. We're getting sovereign wealth funds with Middle Eastern money getting involved in the NBA. And so these are competitive people that we're tired of seeing the same stuff over and over and kind of people breaking the competitive spirit. So to increase parity and competitiveness, they took away the biggest avenue of ignoring competitiveness, which is just paying for a roster full of stars and hoping you win.
And is there a current limit on the max contract for you can pay one player? I know there's a concept of a super max, but does that ever officially max out, or what is the upper limit for how much you can pay one individual player?
I'm glad you bring up the term supermax because that is an interesting distinction of a type of contract. So the NBA max salaries are not really a nominal dollar amount, like saying, okay, hey, LeBron, we're going to pay you $50 million a year and then you'll increase it by 5%. It's more of we're going to pay you a certain percentage of the salary cap And if the salary cap changes, changes each year based on the revenue it brings in, well, then your salary can change on year. So, for example, the revenues were about 9% less than projected due to declining local regional streaming TV deals. So players got 9% less. That was mainly Steph Curry was the biggest hit because he has the largest contract. But to answer your original question, yes, there is a limit to how much a player can get paid. And for some of the biggest stars like a LeBron, a Steph Curry, a Kevin Durant, a Jokic, an SGA, they are relatively underpaid, actually. So do you think like SGA, he just signed the largest contract extension in NBA history, and by the end of it, it's going to be paying him over $70 million. And the crazy thing is, he'll be underpaid relative to what he can get on the open market if it was a free-for-all, kind of like how the MLB has no salary cap, or how you see in soccer, you see these the Saudi league teams paying like $1 billion for a player, Mbappe or Ronaldo. That could exist if there was no salary cap in the NBA, but because there's a salary cap, it limits the maximum amount of what a player can get, which currently is set at 35% of the salary cap.
And it seems like all of this is in an overall effort to increase competitiveness and prevent maybe what we've seen in the MLB a little bit of these major market teams spending 5x what a small market team might on their roster. And then how are you going to compete if someone is spending 5x more than you on their roster? And so far in this episode, we've mainly talked about, I'd say, a little bit of background information and then how that is impacting how teams operate today. What are some of the other biggest stories that you kind of are looking out for in the NBA, particularly on the business side? Or is there anything more kind of to do with this interaction of the CBA second apron and how most teams are actually above that first apron now that is informing the way the league's working?
That's a great question on how business activities are impacting the basketball game being played. That's the goal of our channel, is to explore how the off-court business moves impact the on-court basketball plays. And the biggest one, I briefly touched on it earlier, is the death of regional streaming networks, RSNs, aka your local TV package. So if you think about how you watch a basketball game, and this is an important distinction, the NBA and pro sports, we'll just use the NBA as an example because we're talking about basketball here. The NBA is an entertainment product. It's not a sports product. I'll repeat that again. The game of basketball that the NBA plays is not a sports product. It's an entertainment product. You think about it this way. You can go to your local YMCA or rec center or park and watch anyone play basketball. I mean, you could turn on 2K and put CPU against CPU and watch the computer play basketball if you really wanted to. But if you want to be entertained, you turn on the NBA. You're there to watch the three-point shooting, the dunks, the passes, the halftime entertainment. You're watching basketball in the NBA to be entertained. So thinking about how the business side of the NBA works to maximize the entertainment value of this product rather than the basketball value of this product, we first need to go to how you can consume the entertainment value, which traditionally has been television, even more traditionally, regional streaming networks. So we have the national TV deals, which were signed last offseason, around this time last year, locking in $77 billion for the NBA. That means that NBC, ABC, so ABC, ESPN, Disney, and new partner Prime Video is paying the NBA and their teams $77 billion over 11 years to stream their games nationally. But there's a lot of macroeconomic factors influencing the decline of RSNs. Obviously, the COVID pandemic was a huge one, and how people change their consuming patterns, and ultimately their values and priorities change a lot as well. People are now cutting the cord and thinking like, why do I need to pay $80 a month for, the sports channel and the cooking channel and the life channel and, like the Ted Lasso or the Simpsons, when, I could buy, Peacock for $9 a month and the Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus bundle for like $18.99 and get what I need. Well, so you're cutting the cable package, that means you're cutting the ability to watch the traditional ways of watching basketball. And then since people are cutting a lot of stuff, that means these TV companies are increasing the cost to even get into there. So you think like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. It's smart to go onto streaming. Like, yeah, I mean, I should be able to watch the Celtics. Like, I should be able to watch it on the computer we're streaming on. I should be able to watch it on my phone here. I should be able to, it's 2025. You should be able to watch it anywhere. That's you're right. You're right. The executive thinks that I'm right. So what they do instead is they charge you like $50 a month or something to get for a streaming platform that half the time isn't even as good as like a Stream East or a pirated stream. So you got these people paying extra money for an inferior product, and that in turn makes you less of a fan of the product, less of a fan of the entertainment product. And you think about how traditionally people got into fandom, even going back to like the 60s and 70s, is because the games were free over the air. And, you have the parents and grandparents talk about, back in my day, there was only 3 channels. That's why some of these sports leagues grew. And internationally, the NBA in the 90s essentially gave away their product for free to these emerging countries. And because these emerging countries are able to watch Jordan and the Bulls and Magic Johnson and Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson and all these other 90s stars for free, that grew the international game even more. That's why we see, no international MVP, no American-born MVP since 2018. Over 25% of leagues international. It's the Olympics are getting closer and closer every year. And that was because of free access to games. So if you're making the games harder to access now, you're hurting the league in the long run, and you're also hurting in the short run because you're just not getting revenue for your entertainment product. I know that was a really long-winded answer to say that I'm very concerned about the future of regional streaming networks, but it's definitely something I feel like people aren't talking about. Number one, just because it's kind of boring to talk about, but number two, it's really something that's going under the radar, and as every contract expires or bundler of RSN goes bankrupt, it just goes back into the zeitgeist, and then people talk about it and like, oh yeah, it's something we should be aware of and when it's going to be too late, it's too late.
It seems like your overall argument is that the RSNs provide more localized access to teams such that people in the Chicago area are going to be locked in on the Bulls. Whereas today, if I'm an NBA fan in Chicago and I'm choosing the package that I want to purchase for my streaming, I might get every NBA game and maybe be less tied to a team. And for, let's say, your parents aren't NBA fans and you're a little kid, if they're not buying a package that allows you to stream the NBA games, you're probably not going to be exposed to that product. And therefore, it's almost boosting the accessibility for NBA streaming for people who are already fans of the league. But if you're not a fan of the league and you might not seek that out on your own, it seems like you might have less access to it. And therefore, you're arguing it's not really expanding the fan base. It's maybe more profiting more off of the core fan base. Does that seem accurate?
Yes, 100%. I'm glad you said it's profiting off the core fan base. That's exactly what it is. And so taking a step back, going to the entertainment value, if you have a family that can't afford to pay for all these streaming services and you're offering one for free, they're more likely to be engrossed in that and have the kids, like if a kid, can watch a basketball game for free, but they have to pay, $8 a month to watch a new animated Marvel show, long term, they're probably going to be a basketball fan as opposed to a Marvel fan. But then going to the idea of price gouging the core fan, yes, that's it. I mean, I'm in a group chat from home where it's a bunch of people ranging from our age to the 60-year-olds of Cowboys fans in Dallas, and the Mavs are now last season they're on a direct over the air, so you just get the bunny rabbit ears, put it on your TV and scan it and try the thing. Or you could register online for a free account and then watch the games there, but you have to be, within the Dallas area. That was pretty confusing for the older fans to try and figure out. Like, they're saying, like, I have YouTube TV, I got it last year, why do I have to sign up for this new service again? This is getting too annoying. Like, could you just streamline it? Like, I want to be able to, click on TV, Celtics game on, watch. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. But because of legacy rights and just the value of live sport, it's very hard to do that currently.
As we discuss this issue of the declining prevalence of RSNs and kind of what's coming in to fill its place, are there any talked about solutions that you think might actually alleviate these issues that we're seeing in the league? And then how has the legacy contracts or the contracts in place today actually enable the implementation of a solution that might kind of reduce the friction with these changes?
Yeah, one solution that's been floated around and I think is the right solution, I think it will get implemented, just a matter of when, not if, is the NBA nationalizing the RSNs. So you think of like a country nationalizing an industry, Usually that comes from a negative perspective, but from this one, it should come from a positive perspective. The RSNs, coincidentally, a bunch of them are expiring at the same time. As part of the league meetings this past July, Adam Silver did allude to this, and he also alluded that the RSN uncertainty was hurting the future of expansion in the league. Expansion, the biggest portion of it is, as I mentioned earlier, there's the media rights deal of $77 billion and all the other revenue that the league generates, and that's split around 51-49 between the owners and players. Well, if you're splitting 51% of $10 billion, so let's say $5 billion to make it nice, that's 1/30th of $5 billion. You add in 2 new teams, it gets diluted to 1/32. So that's what an expansion fee is. It's essentially paying a net present value for the dilution of the NBA's revenue sources. And because one of the big sources on uncertainty of local TV deals, that's pushing expansion even further down the road because they want to solidify the local TV deals. So if they have a nationalized streaming TV deal where it's run by the NBA is funding it, so you don't have to worry about your parent company going bankrupt, but you still have the same announcers you've listened to and loved for years. Like for the Celtics example, Brian Scalabrine would stay on there as a color commentator, and they would change it from NBC Sports Boston to maybe Celtic Stream or something like that, and the graphics would say it's different, but you still have the same talent, the same same people, everything you love about the content itself. It'll just be packaged under a different umbrella. And if the NBA solidifies this umbrella, then they can in turn solidify their next path of expansion, because they also see that as an inevitable when, not if. And when, the NBA is a long-term league, so they don't need to jump the gun and, dilute their uncertainty on $5 billion even more. And while I personally don't like this strategy, they could use expansion as a threat to cities to build new arenas. So one that's been talked about is New Orleans. Just for 60 or something years, for multiple reasons, basketball has not worked in New Orleans, and they want to get a new arena there. And billionaires, they don't love spending to build arenas out of their pocket. I think we could all understand it on some scale, but teams will threaten relocation to force the municipal governments to use taxpayer funds to build arenas. So that's what happened with the OKC in Seattle in 2006. It was sold to a guy, and they said, "Yeah, we need public funds." They gave them unreasonable demands for the public funds because they knew they were going to move anyway. They sold to an Oklahoma businessman, and they got moved anyway because of even if they were more reasonable demands, the Thunder would probably still be in Seattle, and now they're kind of being turned around where, if the public doesn't give the Pelicans their maybe reasonable or unreasonable demands, they can move to Seattle. And then instead of using the Seattle as a bait for an expansion market, they can use New Orleans as bait for an expansion market.
So it seems like the threat, or maybe that's not the perfect term, but the possibility of expansion affects the ways in which these owners of the NBA teams are actually interacting with the local governments to perhaps get local government sponsorship or municipal government sponsorship to help improve the infrastructure of the league.
Right. I'm admittedly, I'm not the best poker player. I've only played a few times, but I liken it to, going all in on a poker hand on your second or third hand. You want to wait until how the games play out, see who folds, see who drops out, see how big the pot grows, and then go all in.
Are there any other major stories in the NBA today that kind of play into this basketball business angle that you think are interesting or that the viewers might want to hear about?
I definitely think one is the WNBA and women's basketball and women's sports as a whole. Obviously, at the time of this recording, the WNBA is about to enter CBA negotiations. If I could handicap it or place a guess on it, I would think they're going to go into a lockout just based on how media leaks and people have been communicating through the media. And it's pretty interesting how, it's like there's been a lot of discourse about, is it a money losing league? Is it profitable? The women's players are saying, pay us what you owe us. And then people say oh, well, okay, so then are you going to give them money? Because it's you're not profitable. But then if you do more in-depth look of the finances, the NBA purposely does some accounting trickery to make it not profitable, kind of like Hollywood movie accounting. So it's a real tentative situation, for lack of a better term, on how the WNBA future collective bargaining agreement and revenue split with the players is going to shape out. But that's definitely something I'm monitoring, and I'll have news and updates on my channel as we get more solidified info.
I did a little bit of work, very, very little in women's sports when I was working at McKinsey, and I was also on the women's basketball practice team in college. So maybe I'm slightly more informed than the average person. But another really interesting point that you just mentioned there that I actually didn't know about is that it's the NBA's accounting practices that sometimes impact the profitability of the WNBA. I personally wasn't aware of that. And then another very interesting part of this upcoming CBA negotiation is there's so much momentum behind women's sports right now, particularly the WNBA. So it's not only bargaining about the situation today, but if this CBA is going to last 3, 4, or 5 years, I'm not sure how often they renegotiate. But if the second or third year into that agreement, if they are profitable, and then the CBA was kind of negotiated under the pretense of no profitability, then the players kind of have to wait until that next renegotiation to kind of actually get what they're paid. So again, this seems like another situation in life where there's so many different aspects to it, and the full story isn't really just at surface level. And once you really dig, it seems like there is kind of a lot of truth into perhaps what both sides are saying. Yeah,
that's another great point. It's like, are they going to have carve outs for the growth of the league that they project the growth, and do they meet those targets for growth? And what are the benchmarks for them, and how they can renegotiate on those deals? And then even talking about another league, Unrivaled, which is kind of a 3-on-3 league, kind of like Live Golf, or the American version of golf. I don't know the exact league, but it's kind of like they have like teams that go around and they play in different indoor arenas. Their whole marketing appeal is, we pay the players what they deserve and what they've earned. And so you have stars like Angela Reese and Brianna Stewart being huge parts of the Unrivaled League. If that league continues to grow, will it become bigger than the WNBA? Will players say, like, I'm making enough money in Unrivaled, I don't need to play in the WNBA, and will that dilute both of the products? So will they merge? Who's to say about just overall growth of the women's basketball game itself?
Before, we were talking about how the NBA as a whole in the past has benefited from giving their product, their entertainment away for free to certain regions and making it more accessible. How does someone now kind of go about to watch the WNBA? I don't have cable TV. I don't even know what's on cable TV nowadays. Would you say that the WNBA is more accessible in terms of viewership than the NBA? The same, different? How does someone actually go about maybe streaming the WNBA today?
I would say it's about the same accessibility issues, where you'll need League Pass if you're out of market. So I believe my market right now, where I'm in Austin, is the Dallas Wings. So if the Atlanta Dream and Chicago Sky were playing a game, I could watch that. But if it was Atlanta Dream versus Dallas Wings in Atlanta, I couldn't watch it on the NBA League Pass. I'd have to get the Dallas Wings specific subscription service, and admittedly, I don't know what that is. So it's kind of like that, where there's national TV games. Sure, you could turn on your TV if you have traditional cable like Dish or DirecTV, or the new streaming cable versions like YouTube TV, Sling. You turn on a national TV game, so you have like a Caitlin Clark versus Nafisa Collier game, and on national TV probably. And then if you want to watch your local team, or watch like some certain teams, you have to find if it's on the League Pass they pay for or the streaming service they pay for. And that's also part of the CBA negotiations. They want to make sure they have their value of their new media rights deal captured as well.
Admittedly, I haven't turned on the TV to watch sports in months, if not longer than that. So that was perhaps maybe a little bit for me over anyone who is listening. Now I'd like to transition a little bit to how your overall career has led you to pursue this avenue on your own of basketball business. And how do you think that the skills that you built in your career, internships throughout high school before today, have helped you succeed or work towards success in this, maybe I would say, YouTube journalism niche?
Sure. So first off, I've always had a passion about basketball. I think that's probably the most important thing you could have if you're making an endeavor on anything, is you have to be passionate about it. Otherwise, why are you doing it? I mean, you're probably doing it for the money. And when the money dries up, are you going to keep doing it? And it's just very corruptible if you're not in it for the right reasons. And the right reason is passion. So understanding my passion for basketball, I've always just had let's use the same word. I've always had a passion for creative endeavors. I remember I always liked writing when I was younger, and having creative writing prompts. When I was in middle school, I started a business where I made and sold duct tape wallets. So learning how to make them, having my mom inform me of budgeting and understanding like, okay, hey, I made $10 in allowance this week. I could buy these rolls, make these wallets and sell them, and then sell them for, $15, and then roll that money, pun intended, I guess, back into more duct tape rolls. So learning a bunch of entrepreneurial skills in a low stakes environment, but also something where I felt like I had independent ownership of it, was really helpful looking back on it. And then eventually that transitioned me into buying and reselling sneakers. So Jordans, Yeezys. I actually have the pair that got me into it right behind me, those red and white Jordans there. I remember seeing them on the Nike website. I thought they were really cool. Unfortunately, I didn't get them. Eventually got them, and then those are the pair that released a few years ago. But that also teach me skills about time management. As I mentioned, my mom was really stressing the importance of budgeting and financial management in my duct tape walleting business. And she even stressed this even more because I started taking out loans for the sneakers and saying, okay, here's my business proposal. I need this amount of money to buy this amount of shoes. I'm planning on selling them for here. And if it made sense, then, I would go on and prosper with it. And so learning these financial management skills really helped develop my business acumen. And then also being involved in sneakers while I was playing basketball helped me even grow my basketball acumen and understand what people like to see in, as you described, the basketball YouTube journalism, because sneakers are kind of the soul of your personality, pun intended there also. The soul of your personality. They say who you are. It's kind of an adage in business or etiquette. It's like you look at the shoes of the person, that tells a lot about them. So understanding how important shoes were to the game of basketball, I think, helped me have a better understanding of the game of basketball itself. And then around that time, I also got more involved in the analytics and trying to understand the why certain things happened. I remember that was kind of when the Celtics were right at the beginning of their retool with, Isaiah Thomas, Marcus Smart, Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk. So I was really studying our young wizard, Brad Stevens, and the plays he was running, and learning that he's using analytics to inform his rotations. And as the Boston Celtics became analytics pioneers on their court, I also started using analytics in my own basketball analysis. And eventually, I was extremely grateful for the opportunity my senior year of high school to work within the Dallas Mavericks basketball analytics department. So I spent time within the Dallas Mavericks the year before they drafted Luka Doncic. And so there, I got to learn exactly how an NBA team works. And being involved directly in a front office at such a young age, I felt gave me the ability to absorb information like a sponge, and then go forward and figure out what I want to make out of a basketball career, which in turn led me to combining both my interests of basketball and business, and using an analytical-based mindset to do this YouTube journalism journey of informing how the off-court moves impact the on-court plays.
It seems like the development of your initial business acumen and basketball acumen kind of came about separately, and then almost coalesced in this internship during your senior year or after your senior year of high school with the Dallas Mavericks, the year before they drafted Luka Doncic. And I also just have to say, one of my favorite Celtics teams of all time was that Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart, Isaiah Thomas team that, as you mentioned, way outperformed how good they were supposed to be. And that was just like a blast. I just feel like that team was fun. That team was fun to watch. Every time I saw Marcus Smart play in the Boston Garden, the second he would check into the game, the whole stadium's on their feet cheering. Like, you knew you were having a player on that court who was going to give every single thing he could. I think he had a quote that, I'm going to earn every single penny that this team is paying me. And I think that's just a kind of a euphemism for like giving it your all in anything that you do and really like make the most out of your experiences. So that team ultimately left a really big impact on me growing up, and is, why I've stuck with the Celtics, through the good and the bad. Obviously there's been more good recently, but we'll see what happens over these next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the joy we had watching, those three guards and all the other Celtics that we had the joy of watching, because going back to what we talked about, the NBA is an entertainment product, and you were entertained by watching Marcus Smart dive on the floor, draw 2 offensive fouls against James Harden, and to seal a game, or go 0 for 11 throughout the game from 3, and then make that 1 3 right at the end. Or Isaiah Thomas, dropping 52 the day after his sister tragically passed away in a car accident, and just leaving literally all on the court there. There's nothing like the joys of NBA basketball and how entertaining it is.
Building off of maybe what led you in your career to work towards this basketball business channel, how have you found living in Austin to be? I feel like as someone who grew up in Texas, do you have like a strong community there? Is that more of like a more unusual move? Are more people going to the Dallas area? Kind of maybe give me a little bit of a heartbeat of the culture within Austin and what led you to choose to live there beyond graduation.
There's only one bad thing that comes to my mind about living in Austin, and there's no professional NBA team. Outside of that, it is amazing to live in Austin. Even then, we have the Spurs about like an hour and a half down the road with traffic, and they play 2 games at the University of Texas state-of-the-art basketball facility, and maybe even more going forward. But outside of living in Austin is a great place to live. I feel like new people meet at bars or whatever, and they'll ask like, how long you live in Austin? It's like, like 7 or 8 years. I went to school, and you're like, oh, cool. I just moved here like 2 months ago. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, what brought you here? And then they're just like, I just wanted to move here. Like, going out and doing it. And Austin is the perfect place to do that for a younger, mid-20s to mid-30s person. It's a growing city, growing economy, the fastest growing city, fastest growing economy in the nation. Land is cheap, so if you want to make an investment for a future home. But as it stands right now, there's a lot of fun things to do in Austin. The weather, when it's not too hot, even when it's hot, it's pretty bearable. A lot of green space, a lot of hiking and biking trails, a lot of water to get out onto. I have a kayak. I love, finding a place to inflate my kayak and drop in on the river safely. There's paddle boarding. You could rent boats. You have like a world-class lake where you can do like water skiing, wake surfing. 10 minutes, like not even 10 minutes from downtown. And for sports entertainment, I love my Longhorns. I have season tickets for the football team. Hopefully this is the year they go over the hump and win the national championship. Arch Mania has taken the city by storm, if not the country by storm. And the basketball team, as I mentioned earlier, they play in the state-of-the-art arena where NBA teams want to play into it. And the women's team is great. They made the Final Four. I love going to the women's games. And then the men's team as well. They hired a new coach, Sean Miller, who can now employ some of his now it's legal tactics of recruiting players. And baseball, it's an amazing vibe to go to the baseball games. But UT, they have this thing called the Yeti Yard where it's in the left field, kind of like the Green Monster, but instead of 37 feet up or whatever, you're on the field and behind a fence and everything, and you bring your chairs, BYOB. So I remember I went one time with a buddy. There's this great burrito place called Cabo Bob's right by it. So we got some burritos there, got a 6-pack, and got some lawn chairs, and we just posted up at a baseball game. And then the athletic director of the UT, Del Conte, came by and said hi. He's like, thanks for coming in. Real appreciate your support. I'm like, where else but Austin?
Seems like you have a very strong community there. After going to UT, you're still able to engage with the university. And are all those teams as centrally located as you mentioned? Like you're in downtown, within 10 minutes, you have access to pretty nature-driven activities. Is that kind of UT ecosystem also within the downtown Austin area?
The difference between UT and downtown, it emerges closer and closer with every new build coming about and being built. So, you don't know where downtown ends, where the UT campus begins. But yeah, it's very, very centrally located. The recruiting pitch for athletes is you will be the pro sports team here, because there's no MLB. We saw, people are talking about MLB. I don't think it's going to personally happen. No NBA except for the Spurs, 90 miles down the road. Football, not happening in Austin. And then, hockey, that I doubt they're going to put a hockey team in Austin. And then they do have an MLS team, but that's kind of the hype around that has kind of died down a bit. It's still really cool to have a pro sports team and do events there. But back to the recruiting pitch of living in Austin, like let's say I was pitching you, you're a 5-star wizard point guard, you shoot down 45% from three. I'm pitching you as, okay, you're going to be the guy in Austin. You're going to be the big man on campus once football season ends. And even then, that could help you slide on the radar, because if you went to Kentucky or Duke, you're going to be the big man on campus all the time. And here, you can just go in and work. You can work in a world-class city where we'll take care of you after you graduate, because it's a growing city. As you mentioned, there's a strong sense of community. So the alumni and the fans and people, they consider them T-shirt fans. But if they're wearing the Texas T-shirt, then they're a Texas fan in my book. And so you have all these great deals to grow the fastest growing economy in the world. You are the star of a city of 1 million people. You can't do that in Durham, North Carolina, or Lawrence, Kansas, but you do that in Austin, Texas. And outside of when you're working on your game, you can get a great education at a great school. And you could also have a world-class food scene. I mean, the Michelin Guide came to Austin this past December and gave out a few stars to some Michelin restaurants, including a BBQ restaurant. So if you want like what the French are saying, BBQ, that's in Austin. Nowhere else in the world, as far as I know. And as we mentioned, a great outdoor scene. You're very close to the water. A lot of hiking. A lot of green spaces. So there's something to do for everyone.
Playing into that a little bit, I know from starting this podcast that my perception of the amount of work that goes into it beforehand, I know it'd be a lot of work, but it was so much more work than I would have thought going in. And that definitely is kind of like a push and pull in terms of other hobbies and things that I like to do outside of, my core career. Right now, I went back to school, so I'm a student now. But how have you found your ability to manage your balance in your life as, obviously you work a full-time job and then you also work on your basketball business podcast? How have you found your overall sense of balances juggling those things and then within the city of Austin as well?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm naturally an anxious person, and if I feel like there's a lot going on my plate, I'll get overwhelmed easily and shut down and not do any of it, which is not healthy at all. So I found the most beneficial way to help me with that is scheduling and blocking time out. So I have a work phone and a personal phone. On my personal phone, I have, time blocked from like around 8 to 5:30 for work. And, that's work time. So, I can't schedule a call if like I want to do a, networking call with someone for the basketball business for a video writing, need more insight. I have to do it after 5:30 because I want to focus on my day job and work. But after that, I schedule breaks, and I also like to schedule times where it's kind of like free time per se, but not free time. Like, just, go do whatever. It's like free time to go work out. So that could be, if I have an hour, so I could be riding a bike for an hour. I can go to the gym and, do something there. I could be, doing some stretching and biking, or, running or kayaking, anything like that. Making blocks in my day, I felt has been able to grow my channel effectively, because I have times where I'm saying, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to doing this for this amount of time. I'm going to complete as much as I can during I'm going to feel comfortable with what I can complete. And if I need to push things around, I could do that as well. But because it's a priority for me, I'm putting it on my calendar, and I'm going to work to get it done in this time slot.
One thing that I didn't bring up earlier that I want to ask you now is, in producing these videos for basketball business, what is your journalistic process like? What different sources do you use? How much of it is maybe you actually just kind of looking at a basketball team's roster, all their salaries, and is it all novel analysis? Do you like to kind of pull from other NBA analysts and then put your own spin on things? How do you work your way through all the information out there to overall bring about the perspective that you bring on basketball business?
Sure. I try to think of initially, when I'm making a video, what would I want to see? And I'm putting myself in the shoes audience. What would they want to see? So then I try to answer the questions they would want to get answered. We'll use this video I'm working on. It may be out by the time this podcast drops, but how LeBron became a billionaire. Think about that. Like, well, how did he become a billionaire? Okay, well, I can think of, he obviously made money for his contracts. Okay, how much money did he make with his contracts in the NBA? Then he has his endorsement deals. Which endorsement deals does he have? I know the Nike one is a big one. How did he get there? And then I try and find sources that are, reputable. Like, so I don't want, Randy'sMoneyBlog.com, with all respect to Randy, because it's probably not, verified and sourced, but it's something like Forbes is more verified and sourced. Their methodology is listed. And then they also have the authors easily available to contact. So sometimes if I need clarification on something or just want to talk more in depth, because as you know, as a creative, not everything gets put out into the final product. Something is left on the cutting floor or in draft form. So maybe they have something to add in that was they couldn't add for whatever reason. And then I also like seeing the commentary, going back to what the audience says. I like just seeing what commentary is on social media. So, Another example is I'm working on this video that will be out by the time this one comes, about how a missed fax in the summer of 2003 free agency enabled the Heat to win their first championship. And there's a lot of jokes that I was doing the research about it. There was a lot of jokes about Pat Riley and how his nickname is the Godfather, and he made that agent an offer he couldn't refuse. As far as I explained more in the video. So then, I try and adapt some of the jokes or memes that commentary that people say, to, make it a more personal video, because something I do want to work on in my videos is be more personal, not just like, kind of like a lecture, like a Zoom recording, like you can turn it on just to watch the videos and show, but more of like something like you're engaged in watching, because, if the audience isn't engaged and the people don't believe, the people don't believe in the message you're saying, over time they'll lose interest. So, like for CBA 101, obviously, there's only so much interest you could generate in that video. But I want to make it, fun to learn, fun to understand. That's why I volunteer coach for a 6U basketball team. And I try to make the drills fun there. So one thing that we're working on is dribbling and defense. So keeping the ball away from someone you're dribbling. We play this game called Pirates, where everyone has the ball except for one kid, and they're all in the 3-point line. And the one kid that doesn't have the ball is the pirate, and he tries to go around and steals the ball from the kid, from the other kids. And if they steal the ball, then you become a pirate, and the last person with the ball is standing, and then they're the first pirate for the next drill. So that's making dribbling and ball security and defense fun, as opposed to saying, okay, yeah, we're going to work on, you're all going to get in line, dribble 10 times and cross over, and I'm going to walk through and try and swipe it. Like it's a fun thing to do. They have fun running around, and it's also like a game. Pirates, making it engaging for the audience is definitely something that is part of my process that I try to keep informed when I'm writing scripts, researching a video, or producing and editing and posting a video.
There's so many different skills that go into ultimately what basketball business is, what this podcast is, in teaching somebody something and making that teaching or information that you present as engaging as possible. So it doesn't necessarily feel like you are sitting there just kind of getting hammered facts that someone wants you to memorize, but really an entertaining story such that it's internalized and much easier to remember. Because if you are told something in a really engaging, funny way, you're much more likely to remember it than if you just flashed a fact on the screen and said, Pat Riley, met with this guy at XYZ coffee shop. Then this happened. If you're able to kind of work in those broader narratives that maybe connect to people on a more emotional perspective, it can overall help with that learning. And that's something that I've tried to work on in the podcast, is not only preparing beforehand the episode and what I might want to ask the guest about and so forth. I've actually started to try to prepare less from a more technical perspective and get myself in the right headspace for the episode. Because I found if I come into the episode a little more anxious or nervous, then the overall way I carry myself in that episode, and then the way I'll ask questions, the way I think, is ultimately a lot worse. And all that technical preparation doesn't necessarily help me as much as if I come in with a fresh mind, energetic, excited to have a conversation, learn from the guests, and ultimately, hopefully, help tease out a few more insights. I find that preparing myself mentally makes me a better communicator, and then hopefully it makes the podcast a better platform for teaching and learning.
Yeah, I mean, exercise for you or your listeners that want to do this now. Think about your favorite professors or teachers that you had. They're probably the ones that are most engaging and overall fun, but also ones that were knowledgeable and you learn things. I think we could all think of a professor or teacher we had that was, in their 48th year of teaching, and they were really smart and knowledgeable, but they would, say, okay, turn to chapter 3 in the textbook, and they would just like, read the textbook and, write it down on the board. And then that's class. Like, sure, you learned a lot, but was it fun to learn? And yeah, sure, learning is important, and sometimes it's not always fun, but why can it not be fun?
Exactly. Why can't it be kind of engaging within the confines of what you need to learn?
Yeah.
I remember I had one physics professor in high school that let us, I wouldn't say like joke around or be really rowdy, but in the context of answering physics questions, if we wanted to be a little more energetic or have a little more fun or maybe put some like emotion into it, he was all for that. And that kind of made it all the more fun where, okay, if I, study hard and come into class with the knowledge of what he wants me to know, I'm going to get to like answer the question in front of the class and ultimately like put a little bit of fun and heart into it while doing it. And he'll play along because ultimately you're engaging with the material. And if you're engaging with the material in a fun, engaging way, that bell at the end of the class period, it rings before you even know it. And that's a lot better than when you're there like clicking your pencil, looking at the clock, just kind of wondering when is that bell going to go off.
Something that I learned when I was trying to be a better coach for this upcoming 6U season was this adage of we're playing basketball. We're not working basketball. So, it's supposed to be fun. We're playing here. We're not working here. Like, so applying that adage of just have fun when you're doing it to the content creation and YouTube journalism has really helped me. Ultimately, when I started this channel, I wanted to, make videos that I felt were engaging and that also I felt that people could learn from and I can make a positive impact there. Now, obviously, you have to compromise on some things and, maybe like one video you won't really want to make, but it won't be engaging. But you could think of one video that like you don't want to make will be engaging. The example that comes to mind for me is the initial Luka Doncic trade reaction videos were very hard for me to make as a Mavs fan and someone that spent time in the Mavs front office when they were scouting Luka and just, big Luka fan. They were very emotionally hard for me to make, but I knew it was important to inform the audience of why this trade happened, what were the machinations behind the trade, what's the future for it, what are the the business impacts of this huge basketball move, and what are the basketball impacts of this huge business move. So tailoring your content of what you ultimately will get most enjoyment out of, I think makes better content overall. And people can tell, the authentic passion if you have it in your videos or not. And so that's something I always try and do in my, in my script writing purposes and recording purposes is think about why am I doing this? Ultimately, I'm doing this because I enjoy these two topics and how they intersect, and I want to make a positive impact on the space and help other people be more informed about it and just have fun doing it. So, that's what I try and do when I make these videos.
I would echo all that, and then even take kind of one step further back in terms of actually starting it. For me, there was a almost emotional component of, okay, if I start this podcast and you really kind of just release it to anyone who wants to watch, like how might people perceive me? I was definitely self-conscious about starting a podcast. How might I be perceived? What would people think of the content? And then I just kind of went back to, first off, not very many people watch this podcast. So, I'm probably covered on the basis of a lot of people really disliking the content. But then also, like, if I'm having fun with it, it's something that I enjoy. It's something that brings me energy. And ultimately, I feel like it's something that is a positive value, adds positive value to my life. Then why not pursue it and have fun with it and just see where it goes? And like you said, I'm not working the stroll. I'm playing the stroll and just kind of having fun with it and doing something I enjoy. And as you think about all the skills that you're working on building and using throughout the production of your basketball business channel, as well as the research that you do within that, how do you think those skills are going to serve you later on in your career beyond the basketball business channel? And what do you think those might bring to your future career?
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway that I've seen for my career growth as it relates to basketball business is I'm a better communicator now and a more effective communicator. I can understand what are the relevant topics of or relevant points of a specific topic, how to disseminate them, and then how to leave it open for interpretation and wanting more. So phrasing it is like I'm selling the product. I'm not giving away the product or the information as YouTube journalism is information instead of product. So I'm selling the information, not giving away the information. So that means, they want to come back for more information. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of applicable skills with research and and strategy and time management and planning that I could apply to any career as a result of the skills I gained in this basketball business YouTube endeavor. And specifically on the business side, I think I could have a lot of insight for how the two offices on a basketball organization interact with each other and kind of serve as a conduit between them. One thing I've also discovered, or maybe underserved, is potentially a wealth management for basketball players. So kind of considering how family offices are private equity firms, for lack of a better term, where they pool together either certain families to reach a certain threshold or a really rich family. But you think about all these players signing $100 million contracts, making $50 million a year. They either just got drafted or they're currently playing right now. But we're going to have the first $1 billion career earnings player within the next 10 years. And so all this wealth proliferation into the game, there's a bunch of people obviously trying to get to it. And if you manage it correctly, that can set your families up for multiple generations of success. So potentially being a wealth planner or financial management for players is an avenue I've recently explored. But just overall applying my acumen of how the business side informs basketball on-court decisions and serve me for any career I may take as relates to the game of basketball.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Stroll. If you like this episode and would like to be in the loop for future episodes while also supporting the podcast, please subscribe to the podcast here and follow the podcast on social media for updates. Our Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are thestroll_podcast, and our X account is thestroll_pod. I'd like to give another big thank you to Kyle for being willing to come on the podcast, teach us a little bit about the business behind basketball, and to share his professional story. Thank you again for listening. Much love, one love.